I'm the anti-Brian Johnson. Like, I'm not spending millions of dollars on this optimized life. We have already had a longevity revolution, and this is, to me, kind of at odds with what we have now, where we have this longevity space. It's very male dominated, it's very biohacky, it's very much commercial. We will live until we're 80, like that is the average lifespan, but the average health span is actually your early 60s. You can keep people in some sort of state of living, but it might actually be as like a slow death. How can we have some kind of influence on that aging process, which literally starts from the moment of conception. So it's not just when you get the grey hairs and the wrinkles. 70% of all the immune cells in your body are located along your digestive tract. And so the gut and the integrity and how the gut is working is a really big part of the conversation about this inflammatory aging picture.
Hello, Jenna.
Fearne.
We both worn yellow.
I know, bringing the sunshine.
It's because the weather is actually quite shit outside.
It is, yes.
So we're like, let's try and bring the good vibes.
Bring it.
Oh, it's so nice to see you again, because we've obviously worked together on a couple of projects before.
Yes, yeah.
But this is, for me, a real treat to get stuck into what you are an expert at.
Oh, thank you.
And really just get all the knowledge and wisdom from you. So I guess where I want to start with this conversation today is whenever I personally, but I think most people hear health being talked about, we can get quite freaked out. Like, oh my God, I'm doing it all wrong. Or if I do this one thing, I'm going to cut my life short. And we can sort of just put our fingers in our ears and go, la, 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 la.
Yeah.
How do we have this chat today without freaking people out?
Yeah, that's probably what was going through my mind as I wrote this whole book, because I guess I'm kind of in that health and wellness sphere, and have definitely been making content around that. Like, these are things you should do and these are things you should take. And I got really kind of, disenchanted with it all. A couple of years ago, probably in the midst of COVID, and that kind of sparked this new book idea, because it's kind of like we live in this information age. Like, we're really overloaded with information, but people don't need more information. They need to understand how to embody it more. And to me, that just starts with building awareness and figuring out how to drown out the noise that you have, this sort of constant static, and being sort of true to yourself. And so it changed for me, maybe it was about 2020. And this was when, I don't know what year the Queen died. This was definitely like a seminal moment.
That is so bad that I can't remember that. So I remember exactly where I was and what I was doing, but I can't remember what year.
It was like at the end of that COVID point.
Yeah.
And I was just mindlessly online, as we are. And there was this like, figure out how long you're going to live for questionnaire thing, like put in some stats.
Did you do
where
it?
You live. Yeah, it was like really silly and fun. It was.
I know,
like
but I think I'd still shit
age.
myself doing that.
Yeah, and it sort of spouted out a number, and it was pretty good innings. It was like in my 80s, so I was like, that's pretty good. But then I was like, shit, that means half of my life's already over.
This is why I'm getting freaked out already, because I was in my head. I think, come on, get to 100. But actually, what does that even mean? I could have 10 years at the end of my life, completely immobile, thinking, I wish I died at 90.
So that's why I kind of went on this journey going, well, if I have really good innings, like, there's obviously accidents and these things that we can't account for. And there's a place for fate, there's just these unexpected things. That's more than half my life being over. What am I going to do with the second half? And at that time in my life, I was like, in a job I hated, in a life I hated. I was like really just like floundering along. And then it suddenly was this wake up call of like, how do I do the next part better? And you can't undo all the stuff you did before, all those years of like drinking too much, late nights, all the wrong decisions. But I can make changes now that take me forward. And I kind of felt like I'm the anti-Brian Johnson. Like, I'm not spending millions of dollars on this optimized life, but I want to make sure that I'm feeling and living and embodying every day and enjoying the really small shitty moments. The garbage time with the kids where you're not really doing anything, and really kind of trying to make good decisions, like stopping the mindless scrolling and stopping the mindless like doing things that I know don't really make me feel good, and sort of taking a step back and going, why do I even do those? And then putting that out in the world as like, I'm here to help you. I have all this kind of stupid amounts of knowledge on the human body because I'm a geek and I've spent many years researching it, but I'm also a human being and I have a job and I have kids, and I'm not there with the perfect morning routine. But, you know, if you want to come along on the ride, I'll try and keep myself accountable. Maybe that keeps you accountable. And that kind of then spurred into this book where I wanted to see life in seasons. I wanted to think, I'm not done, like, because I've crossed over into the second half of my life at 40. Like, I've got so much more I want to achieve, and things will change about my body and my appearance. I think as a woman, that's a huge part of how, you know, we feel about ourselves because of how the world sees us. But I was like, no, we need to, it's more than kind of a rebranding, just seeing that we have already had a longevity revolution. And this is, to me, kind of at odds with what we have now, where we have this longevity space. It's very male dominated. It's very, very biohacky. It's very much commercial. You have to buy the stuff. You have to do the stuff. You have to take the things. You know, I don't know how they have a real job because they're doing all
a life.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I've not watched the Brian Johnson doc yet. It keeps coming up on my streaming services. But I did, I mean, I'm not ashamed to admit this, see him on the Kardashians. That's how I get my news. And I watched that episode like, what the crap is going on here? Like, he was, you know, getting up, doing an hour of this very precise exercise every day. He has his last meal at 11 in the morning. I mean, none of it's realistic. And yes, you might be biohacking and you want to see how long you can live. But like you say, you can't negate accidents happening or fate taking control, which would be devastating considering you've not enjoyed any of your actual life because you're only eating at 11 o'clock. And that's a point that you make in the book early on is, let's not think about longevity purely. Let's think about, are we actually living fully? And you mentioned deferred happiness syndrome, which I think relates to quite a lot of what you've just said, especially in your own personal life, just as a human outside of your skill set, of 100%. Going, am I actually happy in my life now? Because many of us with this deferred happiness syndrome think, oh, life will start when, you know, in 5 years' time when I've got the job or I've got the partner or I've sorted out that thing that still keeps happening in my life. But actually, we've just got to do it now. Yeah, exactly. I didn't even realize I was existing in that. I was so unaware that I was in this kind of deferred life. I was sort of in limbo thinking, oh, when this finishes, I'll do this. When this busy period's done, I'll start getting back to the activities I enjoy, or I'll start just sitting in the garden and, you know, looking at the trees, enjoying a moment with my cat instead of going, right, I need to do this. I need to, you know, all the lists and things. And it was a really weird moment to be like, oh, I'm existing like that. And that time is just moving anyway. And life is now. Life is now. And the whole kind of Zen Buddhism about being in the moment, I think it was that point where I like understood it on a different level. I'd always sort of done meditation. I'd sort of read a lot, but I hadn't kind of like permeated the deeper layers until then. And I was like, oh, it really is now. This isn't the prelude to the main act. Like, this is the one chance and I'm in it. And it's not about it always being fun, but I can be really present. I can be really grateful. I can, you know, like sit in the garden and just listen to the hum of the traffic or the birds and think about how beautiful that is. And kind of like those little moments of awe. And it really started to become different. Like there was a shift from knowing it and sort of being aware of it to it actually being like, right, this is the moment to make some change. Yeah, I mean, you start the book by asking a terrifying question. And the question is, are you scared of dying? And I'm probably a typical person that just goes, not thinking about that, can't even go there. It's too terrifying. I understand that, again, in many sort of esoteric frameworks like Buddhism, it's a real daily practice that you think about death so that you are then pulled into the present, you're more grateful for what you're doing now. But I think when I really hone into that question, I am shit scared. I am really scared. I don't know what to do with that. I think that's very human. And I always kind of look at things through the lens of evolution. And I'm like, well, you know, for most of our existence as humans on this planet, we were always under some sort of threat, whether that was not having enough food, getting an injury that you would die from, getting eaten, you know, something happening, an infection. So we had to be scared of dying. So everything was kind of optimized for living and optimized for a very short life. So, you know, living beyond 40 was kind of like unheard of. That's something that really happened
sort of beyond 1900 that we started extending our lifespans. And I think that's kind of interesting because your whole biology is kind of optimized for this one time point where you've passed on your genes. And I always think it's quite weird to think about it through that lens, because not everyone wants to have children, but unfortunately your biology is optimized to pass your genes on, and then at a certain age, you know, evolution didn't quite catch up because we haven't been living these long lives for long enough. So some of the genes that help you get to 40 and reproduce actually can be detrimental in the second half of your life. So it's kind of like we need to adapt to this now longer lifespan that we have and really figure out what do we do with the second part to make it better. Because on average in the UK, we will live until we're 80. Like that is the average lifespan, but the average health span is actually your early 60s. So there's this kind of 20-year delta where we have so much medical advancements now that we can keep people medicalized, well, you know, in some sort of state of living, but it might actually be as like a slow death. And I think this question about are you scared of dying, I think it's very human to be scared of dying. But if we think about death as just this one end point, what all comes before it is just aging. And how can we have some kind of, you know, influence on that aging process, which literally starts from the moment of conception. So it's not just when you get the grey hairs and the wrinkles. We're always aging, but death is just this one point.
I mean, I want to get onto all the ways we can do that in just a moment. But, you know, the title of your book is Immune to Age. We're going to dive into talking about the immune system. Yeah. Why is that important in the context of aging? Because it might not be immediately obvious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I think that part of my work has been like, you know, trying to champion this idea that the immune system isn't just this thing that kicks up in winter when you get that cough or cold, or, you know, spring when you get your seasonal hay fever that's annoying. It's actually this wellness system that's with us throughout our life course. It's a real sensing system. It's there to, yes, keep you protected from infections, but it's also important for healing, repair, for growth. It's part of what nurtures the baby through pregnancy and keeps that safe. And it's got this really kind of unique role in aging, because as much as that first half of life, it's got this inflammatory system, which is really important to prevent you getting infections, to, you know, get rid of viruses and bacteria. But that becomes kind of the system that gets swung the other direction as you get older. So we get this thing called aging. So inflammation that's usually only reserved for when we have an infection. It's the stuff that makes us feel a bit poorly, you know, the fever, you know, the symptoms that you might get with a cough or a sore throat. That can be easily triggered as we get older. So not just by a cold or a flu, but by, you know, things in our lifestyle, pollution in our, you know, environment that we're breathing in, we're exposed to, things that we take. So we kind of have to think about this anti-inflammatory lifestyle component more and more, because it's the biggest weapon we have against this lifespan delta.
Yeah, so because I think when we have a chat about, let's use the term broadly, aging, especially when it's for women, and a lot of my listeners are female, and a lot of them are probably the similar age to us. It's usually like, let's just look at the aesthetics here. Like, you know, what's your skin doing? Have you got jowls? And, you know, is your hair a bit more brittle? But actually, we are diving deeply into biology and how our bodies are working. So are we really to be focusing more on protecting or benefiting the immune system? Is that what we're doing to prolong our lifespan and to live more healthily? That's what we need to focus on.
Yes, it's kind of thinking of the life in seasons. So spring being childhood, summer being young adulthood, autumn being the sort of age that we're entering now, and then the winter years being that end of life, the last part, and realizing that everything's cyclical. Like what you do in spring is going to affect what you reap in winter.
Yeah, that's the bit I'm scared about.
So it feels like,
my spring was quite an adventurous time.
Yeah.
And that's something I think many people will worry about, is if in their spring years they were out having a jolly good time, which many of us were, can we reverse that, or is it too late? Is it too late to do good work now in the autumn years to ensure that we are healthy going forward?
I think that is a real key question, and that's something that I've addressed throughout the book, because I wanted anyone in any season of life to be able to pick it up and see how it could help them. And I think the body is so adaptable. The immune system is highly adaptable. Any change that we make is helpful at any age. The studies that I write about where there's people in their 90s they're doing resistance exercise, building muscle, they're seeing reverses in their immune age. It's like there's no better time to start than today. And then I think by being really aware and zooming out on your life and just going, I'm sort of sleepwalking through doing these things I don't want to do, living a life I don't want to live. And it's not just about diet and supplements, but it's about, nurturing good relationships. Like that's a huge component. Yeah. Your immune system is a social network. And some of the biggest pieces of evidence that I cite in the book is really about social connection and how that is having this kind of what we call epigenetic effect. So genes that are being expressed and how that is controlling this inflammatory response. And it's particularly important for those autumn and winter seasons.
Yeah, I think we could very easily overlook elements to our lifestyle, like socializing, and go, how can that have an effect on our immune system? How can that impact me physically? But like you've just said, when we dive into epigenetics and we look at how our bodies respond, we are social creatures, and we know that there is a loneliness epidemic. There was, I don't know if it still exists, but there was a loneliness minister in the UK at some point during COVID. I don't know if they still have a job, but I'm pretty sure it's still a massive problem where people feel increasingly lonely. We had Professor Bob Waldinger on the podcast a while ago,
wonderful.
Who is amazing. And you talk about him in the book. He specialises in that subject, looking at how social connection is so key for not only our mental and emotional well-being, but our physical well-being. So how is that? What is that? How is that system working? How, if we're meeting up with friends once a week, because he said that he would send people off to go and socialise with someone once a week and come back and talk to me then. And there were profound effects. People coming back with completely, like their ailments had gone, they'd be feeling mentally better. How can socialising have such a big impact on our immune system?
This is where we have to really think about the mind-body connection. And in my field, we call it Psycho-Neuro-Immunology. So it's the psychology, the neurology, and the immunology are all intermeshed together. So your immune system's not in one place in the body, it's everywhere. Unlike other systems, you can point to where your digestive system is or your respiratory system. Your immune system is everywhere, and it's interacting with every other system in the body. This is why it's so important as this kind of wellness system, but particularly with the brain. If you see danger with your eyes, that's information that your brain is then taking. It's making this imprint of neurotransmitters and hormones that then it puts out into the body. Your immune cells have little receptors on the surface who are picking up that signal and then going, okay, there's a threat. We need to be on standby, to be able to respond to that.
And what is that? Cortisol being released?
Cortisol is one of them, but even the different neurotransmitters, so things like dopamine, oxytocin, the love hormone, this is a really important one. So it's really important for bonding. So between a mother and a child, or a romantic couple, or friends, or even you and your pet, you have this release of oxytocin. Sometimes we can feel it,
when I pick up Frank, when I pick up Frank the cat and I hug him, all the oxytocin is released.
Oh my God, so
all
much.
of it.
Yeah, so
it's the best.
If I go back to my moment in 2020 where I was like, oh my God, I'm sleepwalking in my life, I also ended up getting 3 cats at that point.
Best decision ever. Best decision you could have ever made.
So
that's going to add years to your life.
Completely. But we can almost feel it, that sort of like love feeling that you get. And our immune cells have receptors on their surface for oxytocin. And that is basically what you're thinking and feeling, directing your physiology, going, I'm safe, I'm loved, I'm felt, I'm seen, I'm wanted. And I think those are really, really human things that we just don't have anymore.
We just overlook that, the mind-body connection, as you mentioned at the start of that. I think we can often just poo-poo it and go, as if that's a thing. But the one, I think you reference this in the book, but the one depiction of that I always go, oh, I completely understand that, is if you are to imagine a lemon and then your mouth starts watering. That is quite literally mind-body connection. You've thought of a lemon, you don't even have to eat one or see one in real life. And you have a physical reaction to it. It's no different if you're lonely versus hanging out with people that make you feel amazing.
Yeah. And we have, great ways to connect with people. Like, during COVID, everybody started doing Zoom calls with their families and things. I can go on social media and I can see like a million different reels of people where I'm like, oh my God, I feel seen. But there's something about the physical contact as well. So your heart is this electromagnetic thing. You can actually detect the electromagnetic field of your heart from outside your body from several feet, which is amazing. And if you imagine on the wall there was pendulum clocks and they're all swinging slightly differently because you've just hung them on the wall, eventually they will start to synchronize.
What if you're with another person, your heartbeats
and so
syncing?
if you're with another person, your heartbeats are eventually synchronizing, and it's all different bits of our body language, and things that we're putting out is helping with that synchronization. But
that's the cutest bit of science I've ever heard.
It's so cute, isn't it?
It's adorable.
When I learned this, it put parenting in a whole other realm for me, because if your child is crying as they fell over and they run to you and you hold them, you're very calm because everything's fine, so your heart rate is calm, your breathing is calm. Their heart is like going a million beats a minute. They're hysterical, and their little heart is going to be able to phase lock onto your bigger, stronger heart, and that sort of connection is going to help them regulate. So this kind of co-regulation that we have, it's very physical, and it's
so
really
gorgeous.
blew my mind. And it's why you want to hug a friend. It's why you want to meet with people in real life and have that physical connection. So it's great that we have all the technology, but I think there is a fundamental thing that we can't replace.
Yeah, we need to be together.
Yeah.
And also, of course, any of that, whether it's physical touch, being with people that make you feel great, is going to reduce stress. Now, we all know, and this is again where people might go, I can't listen to this because I am really bloody stressed.
Yeah.
We've all got stress in our lives. Like, it's almost impossible in the modern age to deal with all the things we're meant to be dealing with, especially for people that are trying to juggle lots of multiple areas of life, to not feel utterly stressed out of your mind all of the time. Now, of course, we need to reduce that because we know it has an impact.
Yes.
And when we put it into the context of everything we've just talked about with the mind-body connection, stress I'm imagining is up there as one of the number one things that is very negatively impacting our immune system and just our entire body.
Yes, yeah, completely. And this is not, to scare anyone. I am like a self-confessed stress head. This is probably my number one kind of lever that I struggle to pull. And I'm happy to share the sort of the journey that I've went on with that. But if we think about something like heart disease, which is the biggest killer globally, and I feel like we're a bit numb to heart disease because even as a kid, I remember, all those campaigns about heart disease. It's just been up there as the biggest killer for a really long time. And we've got tools and medications and ways to treat people, but the problem hasn't really changed. In fact, it's probably got worse. And we know, and there's a whole part in the book where I write about this as a sort of midlife crisis is really heart disease, because the roots of it start much younger. So it is that inflammation, it is that keeping our immune system happy, keeping it controlled, keeping it, in its lane, doing its job and not spilling over this unwanted inflammation. But if you take all the risk factors for heart disease, which is, the classic things like, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, poor diet, and then you look at things like stress, then you have like this huge jump in risk. So it's not just the usual suspects. And if we think about, we have a lot of access to better information about what we should be eating. We've got, whole diet protocols for people with heart disease risk. But the stress element is something that is this nebulous thing that nobody knows how to address. And that seems to be the kind of missing link there. The stress is going up. We're not managing to get on top of this heart disease issue. And what do we do? It's something that the way we have medicine at the moment, it's not got the capacity to sort of bring that in and go, how do we define this nebulous stress thing and make it better? Because it's a big ship to turn.
It is, and it's tricky because everyone's got different reasons for their
Yes.
stress, and some of those reasons, there's solutions and there's ways of mitigating it, and at other times it feels less doable. So it's really tricky. And I think also one of the big problems, I guess, is feeling super stressed a lot of the time has been normalized. Like everyone is rushing around. It's become almost illegal to say, oh, I'm not doing anything today, or are you busy right now? No, not really. It's like, what? People are sort of terrified to admit they're not doing much, or that they've taken a day to do nothing. We don't know how to rest anymore.
I got quite vulnerable in the book because I was kind of like, oh, I don't care anymore. It's not just about science, it's about real life stuff. And I was thinking, in that midlife chapter, because that's what resonates with me in my current experience, it's not always the big things that are stressful. There are big things, but sometimes it's just like from opening my eyes and realizing the million things I have to do before I have to leave for work, in terms of like the kids, and then I'm running out to take the bin out in my pajamas because I forgot to do that, and then I burn the porridge.
Every week I do that.
Yeah,
I know it's a Monday.
Like
just put them out.
Micro hits of stress, and it's not always the big things, but it sort of chips away at our resilience, so that then when one big thing does come along, you haven't got that buffer. And I didn't really know how to address that for many years in terms of when people ask me, because I do think it's a very personalized thing. And I almost feel like you have to get your own toolbox in front of you. And there's this sort of in the moment tools. So I trained a few years ago as a breathwork practitioner because I wanted to understand how I could use that as a tool, because I was really recognizing I am a stress head, and this is the thing that is sort of running away from me, that I can't, it's then having this impact on everything else. And so now I know that the breath is this component that links the brain and body. I can take control of my breathing rate, or my breathing rate can take control of itself. Like there's an automatic way that we breathe, or I can do it. And I know that there's these different components of my rib cage that are going to be transmitting the breathing rate to my brain. So if I'm slowing my breathing down, it's going to tell my brain, there's a lot of neuronal information from the body that goes to the brain going, everything's chill, it's fine. But then if I'm not consciously doing that and my breathing rate is elevated and I'm not even aware, my brain's going to be like, oh, there's something going on. Like, we need to be on red alert. And so suddenly all these little switches are getting switched on to make stress a reality. And it never closes the loop, because these days, as we know, stress isn't just, running out of the way of a bus that's about to hit you. And then, 20 minutes later, you're back to baseline. Stress is like, walking through life with like a million different little hits.
Overwhelm.
Exactly.
The breath thing is so interesting, because I noticed, I don't know how long ago it was now, it's probably when I was still doing radio, that when I felt, I guess unsafe is the word I'll use. And that, it's not like I'm being chased by a tiger, but, I'd very much be attacked by lots of people online if I said something wrong or I didn't nail the interview or whatever. I would hold my breath. I don't know if it was the top or the bottom of a breath, but I would catch myself and go, bloody hell, I don't think I've taken a sip of air in about 20 seconds, because I'd almost frozen, paralysed, waiting for the moment to pass. And actually, I could in real time notice that as soon as I just inhaled, even once, I would just, everything would slightly relax. And, I sort of fall on and off the bandwagon of breath work, but I know it works and I love it. And I think you're so right. We do have to find our own toolbox. For some people it will be walking, for some it will be painting, or for some it will just be not looking at your phone for an hour. But we do need to, if we know we're super duper stressed, we do need to do something.
Exactly. And
just sitting in it in stagnation is not going to help.
If I had a really stressful meeting at work, I could use breath work in the toilet, like no one would know, or I could sit in a meeting and just be like taking that moment. Other things, like there's so many tools for stress, but that I'm not going to be able to use that in the moment. Those are kind of like the future-proofing tools. Like, there's loads of community saunas in Brighton. I go with friends. Like, we have a little WhatsApp group. That's so like nice. My new pub, and so that's kind of my future-proofing of stress, because we go, we connect. It's like the ritual. It's the chats, but it's also like the heat stress on the body that is helping build your resilience. You're deliberately putting yourself in a stressful situation, deliberately jumping in the ice bath, screaming with your friends. you're in control of that stress and you can get out whenever you want. And that kind of helps the system reinforce so that when you're in the other stressful situations, you're like, oh, I've got a little bit more resilience there. So it's kind of future-proofing and then in the moment. And then really kind of just thought, I've played with this meditation thing for so long and being like, no, I'm actually going to really explore this. And that was kind of like, no, I don't think I've ever really been 2 feet in,
It's a big commitment.
And making space for that and being like, what I'm telling myself I don't have 10 minutes where I can sit down and do this.
I think many of us don't believe we deserve it. We think, no, there must be, there's a cupboard I need to clear out, or we are genuinely just like back to back and we can't see the wood for the trees. But we've mindlessly scrolled on our phones for 15 minutes where we could have been sitting doing that.
Exactly.
We all know which one's going to benefit us.
Completely.
We know. So look, you've mentioned the word inflammation many times, and I think it's a key thing that we need to really look at here when it comes to prolonging our life expectancy, aging, and all the things that come with that, and the immune system and keeping it really, really healthy. Inflammation is our biggest problem. What is causing inflammation?
Yeah, so inflammation is the thing that keeps you, it's the thing that has made us survive as a species, because that's what's triggered when you get sick and it helps you recover. So it's really important, but there's a little bit of collateral damage every time it's released. So we have to take care to control it and contain it. And it's this big explosion of different molecules and cells that happen in your body when there's a threat. So that threat could be a virus, and your immune cells will be like, oh, I recognize that bit of a virus. It's got a specific molecular pattern, and we're going to trigger inflammation because we want to get it out of the body. So we're going to make it very hostile for that virus, and that will, get it out. So say if you have a cold, you get all the stuffy nose and everything. That's your immune system eliciting inflammation to make it really uncomfortable for that infection. Get rid of it so that you can then, recover, feel better. 5 days tops, you're back to normal. The problem is that our immune cells have been optimized, as I said earlier, to live till we're 40, where it's really important to recover, from infections to say, well, so you can pass your genes on. And so those immune cells have these little receptors looking for anything untoward. So it could be a virus or a bacteria or a parasite, but it could be something wrong in the tissue, like in parts of your body that's unhappy, and it will say, oh, there's something wrong there. We're just going to chuck some inflammation in because that'll kind of clear the problem. But if the problem never goes away, you just end up with this recurring inflammatory issue. And now we realize that this is one of the key hallmarks of aging. So it's kind of like, keeping your car running when you're not driving it. It's just like in the background, it's sucking up resources. It's like, keep putting fuel on the smoldering fire and never really extinguishing it. And over time, you just get a bigger and bigger kind of pile of ash. So not to make it sound really scary, but we do have so much at our disposal. And we've talked about stress. It's a huge component. And that was, this Professor Robert Waldinger and his Harvard study of human development looking at the longest running study of adults, showing that human connection was so important for this anti-inflammatory effect. And then, of course, diets. We have now so much research on anti-inflammatory diet patterns. And this, I think, is really important because we don't need to focus on superfoods. We don't need to have a really restricted diet. The word pattern is really important. So take yourself off to your favorite Mediterranean coastal city and think about what the 90-year-old residents that have lived and breathed that. What are they eating? How are they eating?
I mean, you mentioned olive oil. You're like just drowning olive oil.
Yes.
What's olive oil doing for us?
I'm so obsessed
thank
with
God,
olive oil.
because I put it on everything. I was over the moon to read that. I was like, I'm doing one of the things without even meaning to. This is great.
Yeah, I think with inflammation, we can think, why don't we just take an anti-inflammatory? We have anti-inflammatory drugs. Couldn't they help with aging? And the problem is that they cut the inflammatory pathways off kind of too soon and they don't properly resolve. So ibuprofen is an anti-inflammatory drug that you can buy, easily, not even over the counter. But it kind of will make you feel better if you have like a really bad inflammatory issue and your doctor might advise it. But it's not allowing that resolution phase of inflammation. Whereas olive oil contains these compounds inside that look a bit like what's in ibuprofen. So at the molecular level, they look very similar, but they're just different enough that they actually help resolve inflammation.
Wow.
So it's so incredible.
I mean, you look at the blue zones and, you're going to find a lot of them in Italy or like...
Exactly.
I watched
Greece.
that Netflix show. Was it Greece and Japan? I mean, they're probably less on the olive oil, but a lot of those European countries, they're using olive oil in everything.
In everything, yeah. And there's such a high level of these polyphenols, things like olecanthal, that mean that you can heat it and cook with it. And there's many studies showing that it doesn't affect the oil, because there's a lot of concern about, you shouldn't cook with that. And I'm like, well, the test of time alone, look at the sort of along the Mediterranean, where it's the only oil they use for all sorts of cooking for, centuries. And I think that kind of overrides the science. But I would say to people, be really confident and using a high quality olive oil for home cooking, not something industrial where you're reheating it, but that it's totally fine. And it's thought that that's part of why these Mediterranean diets get held up there as being amongst the healthiest, because you're having this tiny, daily dose of this anti-inflammatory. So it's just keeping that, rising inflammation we get with aging, you're just keeping it at a nice level. So of course there's a natural decline. It's going to happen anyway, but you're sort of managing it in a way that's very natural with something that tastes delicious.
Oh my God, it's the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I put it on everything, but like salads, I'm just dousing the salad. It's like my favorite thing ever. Heaven. Let's talk about exercise, because I think, again, for many people out there, and again, especially women of our age, we know that maybe a bit of strength training coming into play is a good idea, but we're not quite sure why. But also there has still been, for women of our age who have sort of grown up through the 90s and the early noughties, where there were all these awful diets and toxic messaging going on about what we should look like, nothing to do with our health whatsoever.
Completely.
And people trying wacky new diets and cleanses and eliminating things and doing all sorts of weird exercise that wasn't necessarily benefiting us. I think what we need to do is understand, right, we're exercising to live longer and to live a more mobile and happy, comfortable life in this autumn/winter period that's to come. So why is exercise important when it comes to the immune system?
Yeah, well, one of the key things about exercise is to do with our muscles. They're not just a structural component of our body that helps us move and be mobile. They're actually an immunological organ. So they have immune cells within them. They're producing these myokines, they're called. So these are immune system molecules. So I think in the book I use the analogy, if you spill something on a table and then you go to wipe it, you often leave the table cleaner than it was before. So when you use your muscles, you're spilling out all these myokines, which are actually pro-inflammatory. So after everything I've been saying, you're thinking, oh, well, I don't want to do exercise. It's going to increase my inflammation levels. But it drives this huge anti-inflammatory sort of recovery response that, cleans up everything even better than it was before. So we really need these muscles to keep doing this for as long as possible. And so muscle is now really recognized as a longevity organ. So it is something that we need to look after. But it does decline from our 30s. So it's energetically costly to our body to hold on to it. So your body's going to not, you're not going to end up looking like Arnold Schwarzenegger if you're not living a lifestyle that commands that amount of muscle. So you will naturally get rid of it. And I guess the challenge is that we do have sedentary jobs. My job is in front of a computer. I know that I need to move my body, but sometimes from like the school run to being in front of my computer to the school run to the kids running around, whatever they need, and then getting to the evening, maybe I can't get out to the gym. Maybe I don't feel like going to the gym. And it's this really challenging problem that I think particularly working mums, hard relate.
So hard. It's so hard.
But then if we put it through that lens of like, this is something I'm investing in my pension, or I'm saving for a trip that I want to do. This is an investment in our future. And it's just making that connection in your mind that my muscle will naturally, decline with age. That is a fundamental biological thing that happens to the human body. But if I give it the stimulus to tell it that I need that muscle to stick around, i.e. doing resistance exercise, that is the best investment I can do. And it can be like lifting your shopping bags, gardening, anything where you're putting resistance on your muscles and finding the things that work for you. Like I have my things that I love to do in the gym and I do jiu-jitsu, but I don't tell other people to copy me because I'm like, this is maybe not for you. Like I like to do these weird things with sandbags and whatever, but you don't have to do what I do, but we have to be like an N of one experiment with ourselves. Like I'm going to make this year, we're in June now, or this next half of this year, go on a mission of experimenting to find your thing that you can pepper through your week that helps you give those muscles a signal that I need you to hang around. Like that's basically what you're doing. You're telling them, I need you to stay around as much as possible. Here's the stimulus, and you find your thing. And I guess even if
like there were tiny snatches of time, like you're cleaning your teeth and you're just doing squats. That might sound mental to say that, but do you know what I mean? No, like, I think on those days where I'm going, oh my God, like you just said, the school run, and then I have to race back, and then it's just non-stop all day, I will try and find like a couple of minutes, especially for my lower body. I think the amount of reports I've read about getting into your winter years and falling being the ultimate decline. And the percentage, you don't know what it is, but it's disproportionately high. And actually, if we can keep the muscle in our lower body, that is going to serve us so well down the line.
Exactly. Yeah, my paternal grandfather, so I grew up on a farm in rural Scotland. He was 95. He was still living on that farm.
Wow.
Like still like growing his own vegetables. Like my grandmother had passed away a couple of years before, and very, very able and, very self-sufficient, very self-reliant, probably to his own detriment.
Yeah.
But he went on top of his roof to clean his chimney because he still had a coal fire, like no central heating. And he was cleaning his chimney as he's done his whole life. And he lost his footing. He fell onto the flat roof of a garage, somehow didn't break any bones at all. And the doctors were astounded, and they said because he'd been so physically active, like his lifestyle demanded him be active. It wasn't like something he had to put into a time box into a gym session. That really was, something that meant he didn't die from that fall, which was incredible. But the sad part is what happened next, that then because it was seen that maybe he couldn't live on his own because this, he could be a danger to himself. So he was just sitting in hospital, like recovering from some scrapes and bruises. And because of his age being 95, the decline in muscle mass is so rapid, and being sitting all day, he then became unable to walk within weeks. I mean, it was like dramatic and very and it happens to so many older people just from that one incident. One fall, you're immobilized, and your body just struggles to hold on to the muscle the older you get. So the more that we can sort of build that bank account now. And I think even when we go into like the spring years and we look at kids and we're looking at things like the muscle and the bone density that they need to build in the first 2 decades of their life, we're actually seeing that is starting to decline because kids are sitting more, the changes to their lifestyles. So we need to, I always think about, going back to our point on death, it's always a series of renewal. One day we won't be here, but our children's children will be carrying the mantle. And so as we get older, we almost have a responsibility to pass on this wisdom and be like, okay, this is the challenge I'm going to be facing with in the next 2 seasons of my life, making sure I keep a hold of my muscle, knowing that it's anti-inflammatory, knowing that can help me avoid a fall, which could really, limit my life. Imagine if you suddenly are immobile and you can't have that social connection, you can't go to your little club with your little friends.
It's devastating.
And you lose that oxytocin. There's this whole kind of trickle down effect. But what can I do for the younger generations to make sure they listen to this message? And we've got almost like a responsibility now that we have these really long lives to be like, okay, let's, help that generation with our wisdom, as well as trying to do the best for our own future.
Yeah, I think everything you've mentioned so far in the chat is attainable. It's not like you're saying you need to go to this specific type of gym and you need to have this exact diet. You've mentioned olive oil, which any of us can go out and add into our daily diet. Exercising, and like you said, like your granddad who's living on a rural farm in Scotland, it's not got to be a workout class. It's moving your body and finding that resistance.
Yes, yeah.
And I wonder what other very simple additions, or maybe it's taking things out of our lifestyle, would you say are essential when it comes to keeping our immune systems afloat and looking at longevity?
Well, I think diet is a big part of it, and 70% of all the immune cells in your body are located along your digestive tract. So from your mouth all the way to your other end. So that's a huge amount of immune cell activity going on in there. And inside your gut is around 2 kilos of microbes. So you've got this living ecosystem, and then it's surrounded by all these immune cells, and they're constantly talking to each other. And so we almost need to make sure that conversation is going well, because if it's not, the gut barrier becomes a bit, compromised. You get some flourishing of less favorable bacteria in the gut that can drive inflammation. Things in the gut can sort of leak through into the body, drive inflammation. So the gut and the integrity and how the gut is working is a really big part of the conversation about this inflammatory aging picture. And one thing that I've certainly found is that people say to me all the time, "Oh, I eat so well now." They've got into their 40s, they've learned their lessons, they might have the means to, be preparing the lovely organic food, and they've experimented with all diets and they've found one that works for them. But they're like, "But my gut just doesn't, it just isn't happy." And I'm kind of like, it's because the diet you're eating now might be great, but your gut's been affected by like all those years that came before, medications, antibiotics in particular, but also things like PPIs, even some antidepressants have been shown to affect the gut microbes. The pollution, if we're here in London, you're swallowing whatever's in the air.
A lot of shit.
Yeah, exactly. Microplastics are becoming an emerging thing. We're kind of like, we've got this assault on our guts right from the start, right from, the minute we enter the world. And that, I think, is probably the biggest challenge that we have in terms of humanity. I think it's a birthright for a child to be born with a healthy microbiome, but we've got this kind of impoverished microbiome situation where every generation has, like the rainforest being cut down, like we're losing some of those good microbes and they're extinct and we don't know if we can get them back.
Well, even the soil that our organic vegetables are grown in is fucked. So it's like, you're right. What do we do?
What do we do?
Just do our best.
And so people will go on this really, like, fibre is so important. That is the food for your gut microbes. You need to feed them well to look after them. And people will start eating all this I've heard fibre is really good for me. I'm eating, 20 different plants this week. But Jesus, my gut is giving me like some feedback. And it's because your gut's not really ready for that change.
Yeah.
It didn't get the
feedback
memo.
is brutal.
Yes. You have to go slow and steady. So I think people will find themselves on this like, oh, I'm doing all the stuff I've been told. I've got the lentils, the beans, the pulses, the chickpeas, all the different fruits and veg. It's, I'm doing all the right things. My gut still isn't happy. And I think there it's about the dose. You have this lovely ecosystem inside you. If you just dump on a whole load of fertilizer, you're probably just going to kill like the vibe,
Yeah.
You have to go low and slow. You have to nurture it like a garden. And there was this lovely study in the US by the Sonnenbergs, who are a couple who do a lot of gut health research. And they got people to just take fermented foods, any fermented food of their choice. So it could be your kombucha, your kimchi.
I'm obsessed with kimchi.
Yeah, love kimchi.
I cannot get enough
Yes.
of kimchi.
My whole fridge just smells like kimchi.
I love it.
Yeah, it's so good.
Heaven.
Yeah, so choose your favorite. Take it for a set amount of time. And then they did a whole bunch of analysis, including looking at the immune system and particularly levels of unwanted inflammation. And what they found was it didn't really matter which fermented food you went for. You had an improvement in this unwanted inflammation. So it was having a beneficial effect on your gut microbiome, which was then having a beneficial effect on your immune system in the gut because they're constantly talking to each other. But then, of course, the immune system is passing that out to the whole body. So what happens in the gut doesn't just stay in the gut. And the interesting thing was that they also looked at giving people a fibre intervention. So what happens if we just give them more fibre? And they found the results, and this was something they spoke about outside of the published data because they were a little bit like, this needs exploring. And it was kind of like, we know fibre is really important for those gut microbes. That's what they eat. That is their food. But if your gut microbes are kind of out of whack, they can't cope with that fibre. And it's almost like having the reverse effect. You're getting the symptoms, you're feeling uncomfortable. It might even make things worse. And so you have to go with this low and slow approach. So I would say make sure you're getting fibre into your diet. It's something in the UK that we know roughly we get half of what we're meant to get. And I feel like fibre has this kind of image problem. Like it's what we think of like bran flakes and and stuff.
Yeah,
we're not
from
really,
the 80s.
Yeah, people don't really know what is fibre, and it's all plants. It's even things like dried herbs and spices, fruit and veg and nuts and seeds, like all of the different legumes, beans, pulses, and just trying to get that into your diet and do it low and slow and have your fermented foods alongside it. And I think that is kind of the best we can do for a healthy, resilient gut microbiome amidst what is a very challenging environment.
Yeah, without doubt. You talk about oral hygiene as well. What's the importance there? Because I wasn't necessarily expecting to read about that.
Yeah, so that would be like my other key tip for anyone listening to take away from this. Make friends with your dental hygienist. It's really important.
Yeah, so why? Talk to me about this.
Again, it's we have this ecosystem of microbes in our mouth, and that's healthy, it's normal. But whatever your mouth is doing, you're swallowing that and it's seeding what's going on in the gut. So it's almost kind of upstream of gut health. We have to think about the mouth. The mouth is going to be affected by the environment you're in. So we know that cities and different actual physical environments have their own microbiomes. We're breathing in microbiomes from whichever environment we're in, and this is going to affect the oral microbiome. But there's a particular microbe called P. gingivalis, which can cause inflamed gums and different periodontal issues, which is why we should go and see our dental hygienist really regularly.
I'm literally going to book later. Like I'm doing the kimchi thing, but hygienist I've let slide.
Yeah.
And I'm going to book today.
Get that in the diary, get the reminders in. Yeah, make friends with them.
Because you were saying like the entry point for all sorts of, common colds, whatever, are eyes, mouth, and was there another one? I can't remember.
Nose. Yeah. So we really need to reinforce these areas. But if we have inflamed gums or unhealthy oral microbiome, then those microbes seem to make the little journey away from the gums and find themselves in different parts of the body where they're there just going, oh, I'm just going to trigger some inflammation because the immune system's going to see it and go, oh, you shouldn't be there. But it's kind of persistent because it's always coming from the mouth. So you have this constant supply. So you're never able to get rid of the inflammation that's been triggered by this. And also the mouth, can be, it's really important for production of what we call nitric oxide. So this is when we are producing a gas that actually helps relax our blood vessels. So that's really important for things like blood pressure, which again, going back to heart disease, this is an issue there. So really the mouth is such a kind of overlooked aspect of our health. And, I was previously at the University of Sussex, and I had this girl doing a project with me, and she happened to have been a dentist in her previous life before she'd come to do this biomedical research. And we started this whole thing looking at the research in dentistry about people with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an inflammatory condition affecting the joints, who improved their oral health by going to see their dental hygienist regularly and getting the correct advice about what to do with this P. gingivalis infection if they had it. But there was nothing in the rheumatology evidence base about the dentistry. It was like the two fields needed to talk to each other.
Wow.
So this was like a piece of work we were doing where we're like, we need to sort of cross-pollinate here, because imagine your rheumatologist is taking your medical history and saying like, how often do you see your dental hygienist, and do you have bleeding gums, and have you any issues in your mouth, and working together, and then as part of your treatment plan you've got that improvement.
I mean, it all makes total sense. It's so bizarre almost that we see the body as all these little separate bits. It's like it's one thing.
Yeah,
it's all connected. It's one thing.
We kind of had to do that in medicine, like silo things. Even within immunology, there's not really a kind of medical immunology discipline. It's rheumatology or allergy or like it's siloed into different aspects. And sometimes I think we need to bring in maybe inflammation as a subject of its own, because it touches everything now, not just infectious disease, but autoimmune disease, allergies, aging, the sort of non-infectious killers like heart disease, certain cancers. And so we almost have that common thread pulled together somehow rather than all the silos.
Yeah, my God, it's so utterly mind-blowing and fascinating. I kind of want to round off by going back to the initial theme of sort of, are you scared of dying? because you mention that towards the end of the book again and talk about living fully. Because yes, we can all try and be like Brian Johnson and have this regimented life and live for as long as possible. But actually, are we living fully? Are we in each day experiencing it? What does that mean to you, living fully?
Yeah, I think that is just, I open my eyes in the morning, I feel grateful. I try not to leap onto the treadmill of life. I know that there's emails waiting for me that I need to see. I know that there's things that I need to do, potentially quite stressful things. But the first thing I do, if it's summer, if it's warm, I sit in my garden. I do my 10 minutes of meditation with my cats around my feet before my kids wake up. And I try to catch myself when I go down the path of just rushing through and getting annoyed at the kids because I've asked them 5 times to put their shoes on and we're supposed to leave the house, and just really trying to be like, I get to do this. And it's not easy. It sounds really trite and it sounds really weird, but when you sort of map out and you can buy these where you cross off the years of your life out of your potential lifespan, you're just this is the main event. And also that whole piece of just kind of being okay with any outcome, because there's so many things I can't control. I can want things, I can work towards things, I can desire things, I can be ambitious, but I have to be okay with any outcome. I have to be okay with that thing not happening, that career move going wrong. And I think that gave me a lot of confidence. I was scared for a long time, and that kept me paralyzed in a situation where I was really sleepwalking in my life. And so since that kind of moment of realization, I quit my job, I quit my marriage, I've completely changed my life, and I've never felt happier. And I have those moments of fear. I have those moments where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is all feels like a terrible plan. But I think that's really normal, and I think that's really human. But if you can center yourself and listen to that voice deep inside you, which I think we all have. Of course, we all have it, but I didn't know how to listen to it. Yeah. It took me till I was 40 to even give it the time of day. And when you live really in alignment with that part of you, crazy things happen.
Yeah, and I guess it doesn't necessarily make things easier, but makes them better. Because it's easy to stay in a life where you're kind of coasting, you're not particularly feeling great, but it's familiar. And actually I think often we think better means everything's so easy and everything's just fluidly working, but actually I think better there can be more challenges, but you feel better.
I definitely have a much deeper sense of peace. And I think about the people who are in my life more. I moved to Brighton 8 years ago, didn't know a single soul, and I built a mini village, and that happened over a long time. It wasn't something that kind of happened overnight. And I need those guys, the walks on the seafront, the trips to the sauna, the late night WhatsApp group panics about whatever, and so making sure that I'm putting that sort of good vibe, for want of a better word, putting that out there, and then it comes back. And I know that sounds really woo for scientists, but
that's why I love what you're doing, because I think with this book, but the work that you're doing and how you're talking about this subject, you're perfectly marrying science and all the nitty-gritty that I certainly need educating on with that sense of gratitude for simply being alive and looking at being in the present moment. And of course, they're all related, but these conversations are often happening by different people in different spheres, and we're just bringing it all together because we need to have a well-rounded education on all of it so we can help 100%. Ourselves. We can all help ourselves. I'd love to know, I've got an inkling, but I might be making assumptions here. Where, Jenna, is your happy place?
Oh, I would probably say it's a cross between sitting watching the sea in Brighton Beach or sitting in my garden, just watching the wind in the trees with my cats.
Gorgeous. I mean, for me, tick, both of those. Cats and the sea. Yeah. Happy. I love it.
Very happy.
Well, look, this has been a total education, and I'm sure, like myself, everyone listening to this will be taking parts of it away and working out how it can be, gently applied. This is not like you have to do a whole life overhaul.
Not at all.
But I think everything you've said has been just so entirely helpful. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jenna.